My grandmother had the waiters take my parents' dinner plates while they were still eating, then announced to 70 guests that people who painted walls and taught children to dance no longer deserved a place in the Caldwell family. Margaret Caldwell raised her crystal glass as if she had just made a generous toast. It was her 80th birthday, and the lawn of the family estate outside Charleston glowed beneath strings of warm lights. Beyond the seawall, the Atlantic was silver under the moon. A jazz trio played beside the veranda. The tables were covered in white linen, and every place setting carried the blue compass emblem of Caldwell Marine. My father, Gabriel, went perfectly still. His fork remained halfway between his plate and his mouth. My mother, Elena, lowered her eyes as a server reached past her and removed the bread plate she had barely touched. At the head table, my Uncle Owen leaned back with the satisfied expression of a man watching a problem solve itself. His son Preston gave the waiters a little circular motion with 2 fingers, encouraging them to clear the wineglasses too. My hands burned against my black dress. I was 32 years old enough to understand that rage could become another gift to the person trying to humiliate you. I placed my napkin beside my plate and looked directly at my grandmother. You invited Dad to your birthday so you could do this in public. I invited you so you could learn something, Valerie. Margaret did not raise her voice. She never needed to. An important family cannot keep carrying relatives who mistake mediocrity for virtue. My father painted murals on schools, hospitals, and public housing buildings. My mother ran a dance program for children whose families could not afford private lessons. To Margaret, art was not work unless a collector put a large price on it, and service was not success unless a camera recorded the donation. No one at that table knew I had spent the previous 8 years building Northstar Harbor Partners, an investment firm that financed solar cold storage systems, low-emission freight routes, and clean port equipment for coastal communities. In business, I used my mother's last name, Luna. I had started doing that at 16, after I realized the Caldwell name opened polished doors only so the people behind them could decide whether I was useful enough to tolerate. I had not hidden my career because I was ashamed. I had hidden it because my grandmother measured affection in leverage. If she knew what I controlled, every invitation would become a proposal and every apology would arrive with a term sheet attached. Owen tapped a remote, and a 20-foot screen behind the band filled with an image of a marina lined with glass condominiums and sleek electric catamarans. Tonight is not only about honoring Mother, he said. It is about revealing the future of Caldwell Marine. The words Harbor Crown appeared over a digital sunset. Guests applauded. Owen described a luxury development with private slips, rooftop restaurants, and electric sightseeing vessels. Preston stood beside him in a navy tuxedo, smiling as photographs showed models drinking champagne on boats that did not yet exist. According to them, Harbor Crown would rescue the company my grandfather had started with 2 shrimp boats, a borrowed engine hoist, and a repair shed that leaked in 4 places whenever it rained. I watched financial projections slide across the screen. The numbers were too smooth. The occupancy curve rose without a seasonal dip. Construction costs stayed flat despite every contractor in the region raising bids. Then I saw the name of the battery manufacturer supplying the catamarans. My team had rejected that manufacturer 11 months earlier. Its cooling system had failed during continuous operation in tropical heat, and 3 vessels in Panama had been recalled after battery compartments overheated. Those boats cannot handle a Charleston summer under a full-day schedule, I said. The applause died so quickly I heard ice settle in a pitcher. Owen looked at me as though a chair had spoken. Excuse me? The battery supplier has unresolved thermal issues. If you pledge the repair yard or the cold storage network as collateral, you risk the livelihoods of hundreds of families on equipment that has already failed in comparable heat. Preston laughed. The muralist's daughter is giving us an infrastructure lecture. I am giving you a risk warning. Based on what? A few environmental blogs. Based on independent engineering reports. He lifted his glass toward me. Your job is playing investor with green apps and grant money. We create real jobs. Several guests laughed because Preston had given them permission. I recognized 2 bankers near the veranda and a city council member at the next table. None of them asked how he knew what my job supposedly was. None of them asked to see the reports. My father took my mother's hand. He had swallowed insults from his mother for most of his life because some part of him still believed the next holiday might be different. He had painted a portrait of Margaret for her 70th birthday. She hung it in a back hallway and told guests the frame was more valuable than the picture. He had designed the Caldwell Marine Centennial mural for free. Owen covered half of it with a sponsor banner during the ceremony. This time, Dad stood. My daughter does not play at anything, he said. His voice shook, but he did not sit down. And if she sold lemonade on the pier, she would still deserve more respect than you have shown her tonight. Margaret's face hardened. She tapped a spoon against her glass once. Then clarity is overdue. The trio stopped playing. This afternoon, I signed an irrevocable transfer of family voting control to Owen and Preston. Gabriel, you, your wife, and your daughter are excluded from all Caldwell property, distributions, and decisions. From tonight forward, you will not describe yourselves as heirs to James Caldwell. My father stared at her. I watched 40 years of hope disappear from his face in less than a minute. Some guests studied their plates. Others leaned forward. Humiliation is a form of entertainment when the victim is not you. Preston bent toward me, smelling of bourbon and expensive cologne. Do not worry, cousin. Once the marina opens, we may hire your father to paint the logo. My mother rose before I did. There were no tears on her face. She slipped an arm around Dad's waist, not because he was weak, but because she wanted him to feel the direction of the door. We are leaving, Gabriel. I stepped close to Margaret. The candlelight made her diamond earrings flash like tiny blades. You did not remove us from a family, I said. You released us from a business you are helping them sink. Get out of my house. We crossed the lawn while the musicians, unsure what else to do, began playing something light and cheerful. I could feel people watching our backs. Dad walked between Mom and me with his shoulders pulled inward. At the gate, rain had started drifting in from the ocean. An elderly man waited beneath a black umbrella beside a dark sedan. Thomas Beck had been my grandfather's accountant for 34 years. He had a narrow face, careful gray hair, and the patient eyes of someone who had spent a lifetime noticing what powerful people assumed he would ignore. Valerie, he said. Your grandfather gave me instructions for this exact night. He handed me a small wooden box with a compass carved into the lid. Dad looked up. Thomas, what is this? Something James hoped I would never need to deliver. Inside the box were a brass key, a flash drive, and an envelope sealed 16 years earlier. My name appeared on the front in my grandfather's uneven handwriting. I opened it beneath the gatehouse light. Vale, I cannot force your grandmother to recognize your father's worth. I cannot stop Owen from confusing shine with direction. I can only protect the honest pieces long enough for someone better to choose what happens to them. I created a quiet trust for you and a protected purchase option over the repair yard and the coastal cold storage network. Build something before you claim anything. If they ever mortgage working people's lives to rescue their pride, you will decide whether those people sink with them. The rain struck the paper in dark spots. I read the letter twice. My grandfather had died when I was 18. He had paid for my education through a trust whose origin I was not allowed to disclose until I turned 30 or until a specific business condition occurred. That trust had provided the first $600,000 I used to launch North Star. I had treated it as a debt to his faith, not a prize for sharing his blood. By then, North Star managed $420 million across 6 funds and employed engineers, operators, lawyers, and analysts in 4 states. Dad's eyes moved from the letter to me. You knew there was a trust? I knew about the education fund and the restrictions. I did not know about the repair yard option. Thomas unlocked his phone. There is more. He showed me an email sent that afternoon by Preston's office. Subject, Harbor Crown Rescue Gala. Strategic guest, Valerie Luna, founder and managing partner, North Star Harbor Partners. They were seeking a $38 million emergency investment. The gala was scheduled for Friday at the Charleston Harbor Club. Preston had invited the woman he believed could save Caldwell Marine without realizing she was the cousin whose dinner plate he had just ordered removed. Dad let out a sound that was not quite a laugh. He does not know your professional name. He never bothered to learn Mom's last name, I said. Thomas looked back toward the glowing estate. Owen knows the company has maybe 5 weeks before it misses payroll or violates its loans. Margaret believes tonight's announcement proved they are stronger than ever. Preston believes a new investor will cover every lie. Neither understands what is inside that box. I closed my fingers around the brass key. Where does it go? Your grandfather's old records room at the repair yard. Dad shook his head slowly. Owen converted that room into storage after Dad died. He converted the room, Thomas said. He never found the floor safe. Lightning spread soundlessly over the water. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I looked at my father and saw how much he had paid for the hope of being chosen. Nothing in that box could return the birthdays he had spent defending Margaret, the murals he had painted to earn praise she rationed, or the nights my mother had held him after another family dinner left him feeling small. I am not saving their marina, I said. Thomas nodded. James did not ask you to. But if 280 employees are tied to the collateral, I will find a way to protect them. My mother took the wet letter from my hand and folded it carefully along its old crease. Then do it for the right people. Do not do it to make your grandmother finally see you. I met her eyes. She understood the danger better than anyone. Revenge could wear the same expensive clothes as justice. I stopped needing her approval years ago. Mom glanced at Dad. You did. Your father is just learning. We drove away from the estate without knowing that, before Friday night ended, Margaret would ask me to pay for another dinner. Owen's own voice would destroy his defense, and the secret hidden beneath the repair yard floor would change who truly owned the Caldwell legacy. The house I had bought for my parents stood near Hampton Park, in a quiet street shaded by live oaks. It was modest by Margaret's standards and beautiful by every standard that mattered. Dad had painted the kitchen cabinets a deep ocean blue. Mom grew rosemary in clay pots along the back steps. The walls held sketches, recital photographs, and the kind of ordinary memories the estate never displayed because they were not expensive enough. Dad placed the compass box on the kitchen table and walked to the window. For several minutes, no one spoke. You built a company with Granddad's money, he finally said, and you never told us. His words were not accusing, but the hurt inside them was real. The trust paid for school and gave me startup capital, I said. Granddad made secrecy a condition. After I turned 30, I could have told you. I kept waiting for a moment when it would not sound like I was offering to rescue you. We did not need rescuing. I know. That was the point. Mom sat beside me. Tell him what you did with it. I told Dad about the first fishing cooperative Northstar had financed in North Carolina. Their catch had spoiled whenever storms knocked out the grid, so we installed solar-backed refrigeration and helped them buy an electric delivery fleet. Their revenue had increased by 36% in 2 years. I told him about a port in Georgia where diesel exhaust had affected a nearby elementary school, and how our equipment upgrade cut local emissions enough for teachers to open classroom windows again. Dad listened with both hands wrapped around a mug. He had not filled. Why Luna? He asked. Because Mom taught me that work should make room for people. Caldwell taught me that a name can become a locked door. He looked ashamed, as if my choice were an indictment of him. Dad, I did not reject you. I know. He rubbed his forehead. I kept bringing you back to that table. Every Christmas, every birthday, every company picnic. I told myself family deserved patience. What I really meant was that I wanted my mother to prove I was not the disappointment she said I was. Mom crossed the kitchen and put her arms around him from behind. You were waiting for love from someone who used waiting to control you, she said. Thomas opened a thick folder. Caldwell Marine had 2 profitable operations left. The first was the original repair yard, where 153 mechanics, welders, electricians, and apprentices serviced fishing and workboats. The second was a network of 9 refrigerated warehouses used by shrimpers, oyster farms, and small distributors along the Carolina coast. Together, those operations supported 280 direct jobs and hundreds more indirectly. Harbor Crown was consuming all of it. Owen had borrowed $61 million against company assets to build condominiums before securing enough buyers. He had spent $2.4 million on launch events, consultants, and a temporary sales pavilion. The 6 electric catamarans cost more than the approved budget and could not be certified for the advertised schedule without additional cooling modifications. Worse, several of the claimed condominium reservations came from shell companies tied to Preston's college friends. Payroll for next month is not funded, Thomas said. The bank does not know how thin the cash position has become. Dad stared toward the dark yard. My father built that shop so captains would not lose an entire season waiting for an engine repair. And Owen pledged it for rooftop pools, I said. Thomas slid a photocopy toward me. It was the legal instruction referenced in my grandfather's letter. If the repair yard or cold storage network were pledged as security for debt unrelated to their direct operations, the Northstar Trust received a priority right to purchase those assets at an independently assessed value, provided the buyer preserved employment and essential coastal service for at least 5 years. The signature page carried my grandfather's name, a notary seal, and another signature that made me lean closer. Margaret Caldwell. She signed this, I said. Dad pulled the paper toward him. Mom claims Dad never told her about it. She signed as a witness and beneficiary representative, Thomas said. I was present. She was furious, but she signed because James threatened to place all productive assets outside the family company immediately if she refused. Does she remember? Mom asked. Thomas's mouth tightened. Margaret remembers every insult she has received since 1962. I suspect she remembers this too. That was the first detail that turned my anger into caution. My grandmother was not simply unaware. She might be counting on everyone else having forgotten. The brass key opened a safe nobody knew still existed. If the documents inside proved what Thomas believed, I could separate the healthy operations from Harbor Crown before the bank seized everything. But exercising the option would trigger a fight. Owen would accuse Thomas of theft. Margaret would argue that the transfer of voting control invalidated the old agreement. Preston would likely move money or destroy records once he realized we were looking. We need evidence outside the building before anyone knows, I said. Thomas nodded. That is why I brought the flash drive. It contains copies through last quarter. The newest records remain on the company server. My phone rang at 12:17 a.m. The number belonged to Caldwell Marine. I put it on speaker. Ms. Luna? Preston's voice carried the polished warmth he reserved for people he wanted to use. Preston Caldwell. I hope I am not calling too late. Across the table, Dad closed his eyes. I am still working, I said. That is exactly what I admire about founders. We were told Northstar is exploring coastal investments. Caldwell Marine has a rare opportunity with regional impact and an extraordinary luxury component. I received the invitation. Wonderful. Our family leadership will be present Friday. My father, my grandmother, and the people who truly understand the company. Will the founder's other son attend? There was a pause. My uncle is not involved. He paints murals. His wife teaches some kind of dance class. Nice people, but not business-minded. Their daughter dabbles in environmental projects. Dad's jaw tightened. Mom laid her palm over his hand. And you believe Northstar can save Harbor Crown? I asked. I believe Northstar can join a winner before the rest of the market sees it. I look forward to seeing what you have hidden from the market. He laughed as though I had made a joke. You will be impressed. When the call ended, Dad looked at me. You are going? Yes. Then your mother and I are going too. I almost refused. I wanted to protect him from another public wound, but the choice was not mine to make. You may hear things that hurt. I heard the worst thing tonight, he said. My mother told me I was not her family. Everything after that is information. For the first time since we left the estate, his shoulders straightened. The next morning, I brought 4 members of my Northstar team into a rented conference room under a confidentiality agreement. Maya Chen, our infrastructure attorney, reviewed the trust documents. Andre Brooks, a former Coast Guard engineer, examined the catamaran specifications. Priya Shah traced ownership records for the reservation companies. I handled the company's loans and operating forecasts with Thomas. By noon, the situation looked worse. The bank believed Harbor Crown had sold 41% of its first condominium building. Only 17% of those reservations came from independent buyers. Preston's friends controlled 5 companies responsible for the rest. Their deposits had been funded by short-term transfers from Caldwell Marine, moved through a marketing contractor, and returned as apparent customer money. They used company cash to purchase their own inventory, Priya said. Then showed the deposits to the bank as market demand. Andre placed a thermal diagram beside the loan summary. The vessels can be fixed, but not cheaply. Each needs a redesigned ventilation path, new battery monitoring, and schedule limits until testing is complete. If they operate them as advertised, best case is repeated shutdown. Worst case is thermal runaway. Can they launch next month? I asked. Not responsibly. Thomas removed his glasses. Preston sold tickets for an opening cruise 6 weeks from now. Maya read the priority option for a third time. The agreement is enforceable, but exercising it requires verified default risk or a prohibited lien. We have the lien. We also need to prove notice was properly recorded. That is what the safe should contain, Thomas said. The repair yard closed at 7 p.m. We waited until 9:30, when the security team made its shift change. Thomas still had legal access as chief financial officer, though Owen had stripped most of his authority. Dad came because he knew the old building better than any of us. The yard sat along the Cooper River beneath cranes and floodlights. It did not resemble the glossy Harbor Crown renderings. Steel plates rested on racks. A tugboat engine hung from a yellow hoist. The air smelled of salt, diesel, and hot metal. Every object had a purpose. Dad paused beside a faded mural on the machine shop wall. It showed my grandfather at 27, kneeling beside a broken engine while 3 fishermen watched. Dad had painted it after James died. Someone had stacked shipping pallets in front of the lower half. Owen said it looked sentimental, Dad murmured. We moved the pallets before continuing. The old records room contained invoices, retired computers, and boxes of promotional brochures. Dad found the outline of the original office beneath newer flooring. We rolled back a rubber mat and uncovered a square steel plate with a keyway at its center. The brass key fit. Under the plate was a fireproof document safe no larger than a suitcase. Inside, we found the original trust agreement, the property maps, board minutes, and a sealed audio recorder wrapped in one of my grandfather's handkerchiefs. A note taped to it read, "For Gabriel, if Margaret ever tells him I agreed with her." Dad's hands began to shake. I wanted to take the recorder away, to tell him he did not have to hear a dead man reopen an old wound. He pressed play before I could speak. My grandfather's voice filled the dusty room. Gabriel, Your mother believes I am protecting the yard because you are incapable of running the company. That is not true. You were the only one of my sons who understood why I built it. You chose a different life because your gift asked something different of you. I am proud that you chose it. If I failed to tell you while I was alive, that failure is mine." Dad sat on a box. For 14 seconds, he made no sound. Then he covered his face and wept. I knelt beside him. He leaned against my shoulder the way I had leaned against his when I was a child. Mom had stayed home because she feared too many people would attract attention, and I wished she were there. Still, I understood that some grief required the witness who had inherited it. "He was proud of you," I said. Dad looked at the recorder. "Mother always told me he stopped speaking to me because I left the company." Thomas turned away, pretending to examine a file. "James stopped speaking for 3 weeks because he was stubborn. He attended your first gallery show from the back of the room. I drove him." My father laughed through his tears. "All those years." Footsteps sounded in the hallway. Andre switched off his flashlight. Maya closed the safe. I slid the original option into a document case while Thomas stood between us and the door. A woman in coveralls entered and froze. I recognized Rosa Delgado, the yard's operations manager. She had worked for Caldwell Marine for 22 years and had supervised every major refit since my grandfather's death. "Mr. Beck," she said. "Why are you in a locked room with Gabriel and strangers?" Thomas did not invent an answer. "Because Owen pledged this yard against Harbor Crown." Rosa looked at Dad. "You know? We found out last night." Her anger did not surprise me. Her next words did. "Then you need to see what Preston ordered us to remove from Catamaran 3. She led us to a vessel resting on blocks near the river. Its white hull carried a temporary Harbor Crown logo. Inside the battery compartment, Andre found that warning labels had been peeled away and a diagnostic module had been disconnected. Rosa unlocked her tablet. "The manufacturer sent an operating restriction 2 months ago. Preston told us not to load it into the maintenance system because investors might see it during diligence. He said the software alert made a manageable issue look dangerous." "Did anyone operate the vessel after the restriction?" Andre asked. "Only dock tests. I refused passenger trials. Last week, Preston threatened to replace me." She showed us emails, work orders, and photographs with timestamps. She had copied all of them to a personal attorney after Owen pressured her to sign a false readiness certificate. That was our first unexpected ally and our clearest proof that the deception endangered more than money. "Will you speak at the gala?" I asked. Rosa studied me. "The last time a Caldwell promised to protect this yard, 2 months later we lost our health plan contribution. I am not asking you to trust my last name." "Which name should I trust?" "Luna. But do not trust that either. Trust the purchase terms after your lawyer reads them. Northstar will exercise my grandfather's option, preserve the jobs, restore benefits, and place 20% of future operating profit into an employee participation pool." Dad stared at me. I had not discussed the 20% with him. Rosa folded her arms. "And if the numbers do not work? My partners and I absorb the lower return. The employees did not create this failure." She looked around the compartment, at the disconnected module and the labels Preston thought he could erase. "I will not walk onto a stage for you. But I will authorize my attorney to release the records if Owen lies about safety. That is enough." Before we left, Rosa touched Dad's sleeve. "I liked the mural better before the pallets." He smiled for the first time that night. So did I. By Thursday afternoon, Maya had notified the bank that a protected option might affect its collateral. We did not disclose my family relationship yet. We submitted proof of funds and a preliminary offer to acquire the yard and cold storage network, cover overdue payroll, and finance safety upgrades. The bank scheduled its restructuring committee for Saturday morning, 12 hours after the gala. Then Owen fired Thomas. He did it by email at 4:42 p.m., accusing him of disloyal conduct and unauthorized disclosure. Within minutes, Thomas lost access to the company server. Owen sent security officers to his office and demanded his laptop. Thomas surrendered the company equipment. He had already preserved the records he was legally entitled to keep, but the firing changed the risk. Owen knew someone was moving. At 6:10 p.m., Preston called me. "Ms. Luna, I want to make sure tomorrow's presentation addresses your priorities." His voice remained smooth, but he spoke faster than before. "Start with unrestricted cash, verified reservations, collateral, vessel certifications, and current payroll obligations," I said. "Of course." Though I should mention our former finance officer became confused about some strategic accounting decisions. "If he contacts you, please understand he is no longer authorized to represent us." "Did he become confused before or after you fired him?" The silence lasted half a second too long. "I appreciate directness," he said. "You will find we do too." After the call, I drove to my parents' house. Dad was in his studio, standing before an unfinished canvas. The recording of my grandfather rested on a shelf beside him. "I should have left that family table years ago," he said. "You left when you were ready." "No. I made your mother and you sit there because I was not ready." He wiped blue paint from his fingers. "I told myself I was teaching you grace. Sometimes I was teaching you to accept cruelty quietly. You also taught me how to make something honest with my hands." He looked at the canvas. "I do not know what to say to Margaret tomorrow." "You do not owe her a speech." "Maybe I owe myself one." Mom entered carrying 3 garment bags. She had chosen a dark green suit for Dad, a midnight blue dress for herself, and a white silk blouse for me. "Tomorrow, nobody will mistake dignity for surrender," she said. I laughed, and the sound released something heavy in the room. The Charleston Harbor Club overlooked a forest of sailboat masts. On Friday night, white flowers climbed the entrance columns and gold lights reflected in the windows. Models of the catamarans sat on glass tables. A string quartet played near a wall-sized rendering of Harbor Crown. The event looked less like a rescue financing and more like a celebration of money that had not arrived. I came alone at first. My invitation read Valerie Luna. My hair was pinned up, and I wore the white blouse with a tailored black suit. I had not transformed myself. Preston simply had never looked at me carefully enough to recognize me outside the category he had assigned. He hurried across the lobby with both hands extended. "Ms. Luna. Finally. We met 4 days ago." His smile held. "I think I would remember that." "I am sure you think so." He guided me through the room, introducing me to bankers and prospective buyers as though my investment were already committed. He called Northstar our sustainability partner, twice. I corrected him both times. "Potential investor," I said. "Naturally." Owen stood near the stage with Margaret. When he saw me, his expression changed first from confusion to recognition, then from recognition to fear. Margaret's champagne glass stopped just below her mouth. "What is she doing here?" she asked. Preston looked from her to me. "Grandmother, this is Valerie Luna from Northstar. She is Gabriel's daughter." I held Preston's gaze. "The one who plays investor with green apps." His face lost color so completely that the skin around his eyes looked bruised. Owen recovered faster. He had spent a lifetime treating shame as an inconvenience other people should carry. "A family coincidence should not interfere with a serious opportunity," he said. "Northstar is here because it recognizes Caldwell Marine's value. Northstar has not recognized anything yet." Margaret stepped close enough for only me to hear. "You arranged this spectacle. You invited the spectacle. You just did not read the guest's full name. If you embarrass this family again, you removed my parents' plates in front of 70 people. Be careful when you define embarrassment." The program began. Owen presented Harbor Crown's verified demand. Preston described the catamarans as fully certified. A marketing video showed families laughing on sunlit decks. I watched Rose's photographs on my tablet beneath the table. At 8:36 p.m., the club's general manager approached Owen during applause and whispered into his ear. Owen's mouth tightened. Margaret demanded an explanation loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "The event deposit transfer was delayed," Owen murmured. "Then use another card." Preston tried one. It was declined. The club had not received the remaining $86,000 balance, and a vendor threatened to stop service. Margaret turned toward me. Need erased any last instinct toward discretion. "If you came here to parade your money," she said in front of the closest tables, "begin by paying for this dinner. It is the least you can do after shaming your family." The same cruelty from her birthday had returned, now wrapped in desperation. She still believed asking me for money was another way to place me beneath her. I walked toward the stage. "I will pay what I owe." Her chin lifted. "At last, you understand your place." "Yes. My place is beside the people you used as collateral without telling them." I nodded to Maya in the control booth. The marina rendering vanished. A plain white page appeared on the screen. Unfunded payroll, 280 employees. The next page showed the false reservation transfers. Then came the prohibited liens, the vessel restrictions, and the $61 million debt schedule. Owen rushed toward the technician. "Turn that off." Preston grabbed for the presentation remote, but Andre stepped into the aisle, not touching him, simply blocking a clear path. "Those documents are stolen," Owen shouted. "The liens are public," I said. "The reservation companies are public. The bank statements were provided by an authorized officer before you fired him. Thomas Beck is a thief. Then perhaps you should explain this." An audio file began playing through the ballroom speakers. Owen's voice was unmistakable. "If Harbor Crown fails, the bank takes the yard. Mechanics are replaceable. People buy the image, not the payroll. The recording came from a finance meeting Thomas had attended 9 days earlier. South Carolina law allowed him to record a conversation in which he participated. Owen had known Thomas was in the room. He simply believed a quiet man would remain quiet forever. Guests turned toward the stage. The bankers stopped taking notes and began making calls. At the ballroom doors, my father appeared with my mother. Thomas and Rosa entered behind them. Margaret saw Dad, and for the first time in my life, she was the one who could not hold his gaze. Owen tore the microphone from its stand. Thomas manufactured this because he was terminated. Valerie is taking revenge because Mother excluded her from the estate. Thomas walked down the center aisle carrying the original ledger folder. Without his company suit, he looked smaller than Owen, but his calm made Owen's anger seem frantic. You terminated me after I refused to certify statements that concealed debt, Thomas said. These are your written instructions. These are the transfers used to fund reservations through companies associated with Preston. Every copy has already been provided to counsel and the bank. One of the bankers stood. Mr. Caldwell, you requested an additional $12 million using pre-sales that now appear to have been financed by the borrower itself. Preston moved to the microphone. Temporary marketing placements are common. The buyers intended to replace the deposits after Northstar joined the project. You mean after my money made the lie true, I said. You do not understand development finance. I understand circular transactions. I also understand passenger safety. Rosa handed Maya a signed statement. The screen showed the manufacturer's operating restriction, followed by the work order instructing staff to remove the warning from the maintenance system. Preston's confidence cracked. That was a draft notice. Andre answered from the aisle. It carries the manufacturer's final document number and acknowledgement from your email address. We plan to correct the problem before launch. You sold tickets before ordering the correction. The room changed. Financial manipulation made people nervous, a concealed safety problem made them angry. A woman near the front whispered that she had purchased 8 opening cruise tickets for her family. A city official asked whether the Coast Guard had received the restriction. Phones rose across the room. Margaret stepped onto the stage and faced me. James left the company under my control. You cannot walk into this club and steal what belongs to us. I opened the compass box and removed the protected option. Grandad left you control over the company. He protected the repair yard and cold storage network from speculative debt. If those assets were pledged for an unrelated luxury development, my trust received the right to buy them, protect their employees, and continue their coastal service. Maya distributed certified copies to the bank representatives. Owen shook his head. That paper is 16 years old. It was recorded 16 years ago and reaffirmed when the liens were filed. Northstar submitted a funded purchase offer yesterday. The senior banker examined the seal. Our restructuring council confirmed the option this afternoon. The offer meets the conditions for a segregated asset sale. Without it, we are prepared to place the entire borrower group into default review tomorrow. The second truth hit harder than the recording. Margaret looked at the signature page. I watched recognition appear before she tried to hide it. James never told me this existed, she said. Dad spoke from the floor. Your signature is on it, Mother. The ballroom became silent. Margaret's eyes flashed toward him. He forced me to sign. So you remembered. For 16 years, she had described my grandfather's final plans as proof that he trusted her alone. She had not forgotten the restriction. She had gambled that Thomas would stay loyal to authority, that Dad would remain too wounded to ask questions, and that I would stay too insignificant to matter. That was the next reversal. The woman who claimed to defend my grandfather's legacy had knowingly helped Owen place its protected heart at risk. I did what was necessary to keep the company together, she said. You kept the name together, Dad replied. You let them break the work. Owen turned on her. You told me every asset was clear. It should have been. Your father never expected Gabriel's child to control the trust. Grandad expected someone to earn control, I said. Preston stepped down from the stage, moving toward a side exit. Priya called his name. Before you leave, the buyers whose companies you used would like to know why their signatures appear on reservation amendments they never received. 2 of Preston's former friends were standing near the exit with attorneys. Priya had contacted them that afternoon. Both admitted Preston asked them to hold units temporarily, but neither authorized the later documents used to increase purchase values. One held up his phone, showing messages in which Preston promised that Caldwell Marine would cover every deposit. You said this was legal, the man told him. Preston looked toward Owen. Dad approved the structure. Owen's grip tightened around the microphone. Do not blame me for your sloppy paperwork. You told me to make the reservation report hit 40%. Not by forging amendments. You signed the transfers. Their attempt to abandon each other revealed more than our presentation had. Owen shouted that the reservation strategy had been approved by everyone who mattered, forgetting that dozens of phones were recording. Preston accused him of moving vendor payments to cover the estate mortgage. Margaret demanded they stop speaking. Each sentence damaged them further. I did not smile. Public collapse is less glamorous from 15 feet away. Owen looked terrified, Preston looked young, and Margaret looked suddenly old. They had humiliated my parents because it made them feel secure. Now the habits that built their power were dismantling it in front of the same people they had tried to impress. I took the microphone. North Star will not invest in Harbor Crown. We will exercise the protected option to purchase the repair yard and cold storage network at the independently verified value. The transaction will fund overdue payroll first. The yard will remain open. The warehouses will continue serving coastal businesses. The vessel program will stop until every safety requirement is met. Rosa stood beside the stage, watching without celebration. Employees will receive representation on a new operating council and 20% of future distributable profit. Their jobs are not charity. Their work is the reason anything remains worth saving. Applause began at a table of repair vendors near the back. It spread unevenly, then filled the room. I did not need it. I thought of my grandfather repairing engines for captains who could not afford to lose a day, and I wished he could hear the sound. Margaret leaned toward me. And the estate? The question was so quiet I almost missed it. What about it? Owen used it as a personal guarantee to bridge construction costs. If North Star takes the productive assets, the estate remains exposed. I had seen the guarantee 2 hours earlier. That was the final secret hidden beneath Harbor Crown's luxury image. Margaret had pledged the house she used to define the family, then staged her birthday dinner there as if she remained untouchable. North Star is buying operations, not private homes, I said. Your grandfather built that house. And 280 people built the value Owen borrowed against. Their pay comes first. She stared at me as though restraint were cruelty. For most of her life, rescue had meant preserving the people at the head of the table. She could not understand a rescue designed for everyone they had made invisible. Dad walked to the foot of the stage. His hands still carried faint blue paint around the nails. Margaret looked down at him. Did you come to enjoy this? No, he said. I came so my daughter would not face you alone. You always let other people fight for you. He absorbed the familiar blow, then let it fall. I spent 50 years waiting for you to love the person I became instead of the son you planned. I brought my wife and child back to your table and called the pain tradition. That was my failure. It ends tonight. I gave you everything. You gave me access and made me audition to keep it. She glanced at the watching guests. Do you really want to discuss family in front of strangers? Dad's voice stayed gentle. You made us strangers 4 nights ago. Mom joined him and took his hand. There was no triumph in either face, only the quiet relief of people putting down something heavy. The gala ended without dessert. The club required Owen to sign a personal payment agreement before vendors released their equipment. The bankers left with Maya and Thomas. Rosa returned to the yard to tell the night shift that payroll financing had been secured pending Saturday's vote. Preston exited through a service corridor, but reporters were already waiting near the parking lot. At 1:20 a.m., I stood alone on the harbor terrace. The flowers still looked perfect. Across the water, cranes moved above the terminals, doing the work Owen's presentation had treated as an unattractive background. Dad joined me. Your grandfather would have been proud, he said. He told you he was proud too. Dad nodded. I heard it 30 years late, but I heard it. He removed the old brass compass from the box and placed it in my palm. Keep going in the direction he trusted you to find. The bank approved the asset sale after a 7-hour meeting. It was not a magical victory. For 5 months, my life became restructuring calls, labor meetings, safety reviews, and negotiations with creditors who believed every promise should favor them first. We renamed the yard James Caldwell Works, not because I wanted to preserve the family brand, but because the mechanics remembered the man who had worked beside them. Rosa became chief operating officer. She negotiated harder than any executive I had hired and refused a decorative board seat until the employee council received actual voting rights. The first payroll cleared on time. We restored the health contribution Owen had cut. We created 27 apprenticeships with a technical college and gave priority to children of current workers without making family connection the only way in. By the end of the first year, the yard had retained 247 of the original 280 jobs. Some positions tied exclusively to Harbor Crown disappeared, but we funded placement assistance and hired 18 workers back as the cold storage upgrades expanded. The 6 catamarans were removed from passenger service before anyone was hurt. We sold 2 for parts, returned 1 under a supplier settlement, and rebuilt 3 only after Andre's team completed thermal testing through the hottest weeks of August. Those 3 later carried workers and students on an affordable harbor route instead of serving champagne cruises. The condominium sold at a loss. Creditors took control of the undeveloped portion. Owen was removed from management and later faced civil claims over lender disclosures. He avoided prison because prosecutors could not prove every misstatement met the criminal standard, but the legal settlements consumed most of what he had protected. For a man who treated reputation as currency, being required to answer questions under oath was its own collapse. Preston discovered that charm does not pay an invoice. The friends whose companies he used sued him. His professional licenses were reviewed, and every photograph of him at the gala became evidence of promises he could not fulfill. He sent me 3 messages during the restructuring. The first blamed Owen. The second offered valuable branding insight in exchange for a role. The third said I was destroying the family over a misunderstanding. I answered only once. You removed my parents' plates before they chose to leave. You understood exactly what you were doing. Margaret lost the estate because it secured debts the asset sale could not cover. Her attorneys asked Northstar to buy the property and lease it back to her for $1 a year. I refused. The house was sold to a hospitality company and became a small coastal inn. The long dining room where she expelled us was divided into a library and 2 guest suites. She moved into a comfortable 2-bedroom condominium near Mount Pleasant. She was not homeless, hungry, or unsafe. She simply no longer lived above consequences. Some relatives called me cruel. None offered to purchase the estate themselves. They wanted mercy as long as I financed it. Dad stopped answering Margaret's calls. At first, he listened to every voicemail and spent the evening feeling guilty. Mom never told him what to do. She sat beside him until, one Sunday, he deleted a message without playing it. I know what she is going to say, he told us. She will describe her pain until I apologize for mine. 6 months after the gala, Margaret appeared at the repair yard. I was reviewing plans for the new employee cafeteria. When I heard the measured tap of her cane on the concrete. She wore a cream suit and pearl earrings, dressed for the life she still believed might return if she remained composed long enough. Workers glanced toward her, then continued moving parts and checking schedules. No one rushed to carry her bag. You could have saved my house, she said. I could have bought it. That is what I said. No. Buying it would have saved the property. Letting you stay for nothing would have protected you from the choice to pledge it. Her fingers tightened around the cane. You protected strangers over your own grandmother. They were not strangers to the company. You just never learned their names. James humiliated me from the grave. Grandad created an exit. Owen and Preston chose the cliff. She looked past me toward Dad's restored mural. The pallets were gone. Rosa had installed lights above it, and apprentices had cleaned the wall without repainting the marks of age. Gabriel will not return my calls. Dad spent a lifetime asking you to choose him. He finally chose himself. For an instant, I saw something soften in her face. I thought she might apologize. Instead, she lifted her chin. He was always too sensitive. The old sentence no longer had a place to land. Then you came here for nothing, I said. She looked at me for a long time. Without the estate, the company, or a table full of people waiting for her approval, she seemed smaller but not kinder. Consequences can remove power without creating wisdom. You have his stubbornness, she said. I hope so. She left without asking about the 247 people whose jobs remained. I watched her car disappear beyond the gate and felt no victory, only certainty. Forgiveness did not require me to reopen a door someone used only to enter with a weapon. My parents opened the Tide and Color Center in a renovated brick building near the old Navy Yard. Dad painted a 60-foot mural of a weathered workboat becoming a floating garden. A compass glowed on its bow. Mom taught coastal folk dance, modern movement, and free Saturday classes for children from neighborhoods divided by income everywhere except her studio floor. I financed the building, but they made it alive. At the opening, 200 people crowded into the courtyard. Repair yard apprentices stood beside children wearing dance shoes. Rosa arrived in coveralls because an engine test ran late. Thomas wore a tie printed with tiny compasses. Dad led me into his studio and handed me a small framed painting. It showed my grandfather from behind, facing the ocean with one hand on the shoulder of a young girl. The girl held a wooden compass box. He saw you before the rest of us understood what he saw, Dad said. You saw me too. Not clearly enough. You taught me that making beauty was real work. You taught me not to laugh when someone's hands were stained from creating something. You only needed to stop looking toward the wrong table. He hugged me as music rose from the courtyard. Mom was teaching a group of children a step that made them spin and clap. Through the open windows, I could see the river and the industrial cranes beyond it. Nothing in the view was polished enough for Harbor Crown's old advertisements. Everything was moving. I finally understood that the trust was not the most valuable thing my grandfather left me. He gave me proof that inheritance could be a responsibility instead of a throne. He gave my father words that freed him from a lie. He gave 280 workers a door that greed could not lock completely. Margaret believed legacy was the power to decide who sat at her table. Owen believed it was the right to borrow against other people's labor. Preston believed it was an image bright enough to make debt invisible. They were all wrong. I did not destroy the Caldwell legacy. I rescued the part built with honest hands, gave those hands a share of its future, and let arrogance sink under the weight it had chosen for itself. The night my grandmother took away my parents' plates, she thought she was showing 70 guests who belonged. In the end, she did. She showed me that family is not the person who keeps a chair empty until you beg. Family is the person who pulls out a chair, remembers your work, and makes sure no one eats while the people who built the table go hungry.